Hello and welcome to Cinemaholics, where we review the biggest and best films coming to theaters and streaming online. One of us is a film critic, one is a casual moviegoer. Third person is me, your host, John Negroni from the Internet California. On the show today, we have from the Internet Pennsylvania. He is a pop culture writer for Cinema Blend. He's also a resident film critic. He writes film reviews for The Playlist, Gunpowder Film, and many more. It's Will Ashton.
Hello.
And from the Rod Band Basement, he is our sound producer and casual moviegoer, but don't call him an everyman. He is our sound producer and sound master, Maverick Hines.
What's up, everybody?
All right, this week we are talking about First Man. We were going to talk about Bad Times at the El Royale. However, Will Ashton has a lot to do today. Our scheduling is a little tight, so we're actually going to save Bad Times for the El Royale next week because we feel like the conversation deserves more than 5 minutes. But we are going to talk about First Man later in the show. And then for mini reviews, we've got some quite a few things. Maverick is going to be running mini reviews this week. So
first time ever. Mark your calendars.
Yeah, most of it is you. So that's going to be fun. Real quick, let's get into our off topics before our featured review. First of all, we want to thank our patrons, as always, for voting in our poll to help decide this week's episode. You voted for First Man to be our featured review over Bad Times at the El Royale. Patrons, you are right in line with the box office because, I mean, both films did not do super well, correct, Will Ashton? But I think First Man did better than Bad Times.
Yeah, I think First Man did okay, but just did less than they were expecting. Because I guess with the high prestige that's going around the film, they were expecting a bigger showing than it ultimately got.
Yeah, I think Stars Born is still eating their receipts. Last I checked, they were looking at like 16 million for the weekend, and you know they wanted like 30 for this movie. Definitely not happening this week, but I think First Man might have some legs. We'll see what happens next week. But with I guess we have some Halloween stuff coming out, and you know it's a busy October, but. If you want to become a patron of Cinemaholics, you can. You can vote in our weekly content poll. And special thank you to our newest patron, Marty, for donating this week. We really appreciate it. Real quick, our happy hour bonus episode that came out this past week is Pixar in Decline, is out right now. That was a fun conversation I had with TJ Woolsis, and it's out right now. And man, it was like an hour and a half of just me and another Pixar fanatic talking about Pixar. So if that is your thing, that's right now. That's live right now on our Cinemaholics feed. And Will Ashton, I think our next thing is we're going to be talking about The Hateful Eight. Have you had a chance to see it yet? Because I have not.
Not a rewatch. No, I mentioned last week I've seen it twice already, but that was back when it came out. So I haven't gotten a chance to revisit it yet. No.
Yeah, Maverick, we have to watch The Hateful Eight together.
I am never against watching The Hateful Eight. I think I've seen it 4 times since it came out.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So we got to see it again for our patron who requested it, and then also we got to watch Mandy because I literally own it, and we still haven't.
Yeah, that one is definitely on the list.
The one movie that Will Ashton has given an A this year, we're just sleeping on it. So apologies.
Hey, last time this happened, it was Briggs v. Bear, and then we both watched it. And we were like, "Whoa!" Like it blew our minds.
Yeah,
so
maybe this will be the Cinemaholics movie of the year. Who knows? But okay, that's it for off topics. Let's just dive right into our feature review. I'm very excited to talk about First Man, mainly because I really want to disagree with Will Ashton on this one, but we'll see what happens.
Don't be mean to him though, because we'll get commenters.
Yeah, that's true. I don't want to be mean. I don't want to be mean in general because you know it's been a good weekend. All right, so First Man is a wide release from Universal. It's written and directed by one of my personal favorite filmmakers working right now, Damien Chazelle. He directed Guy and Madeline on a Park Bench, but he's best known for his last 2 features, which were Oscar hits, Whiplash and La La Land. This new movie probably will have some of that same Oscar prestige. The screenplay is by Josh Singer. He did Spotlight and The Post, and it's based on an earlier screenplay by Nicole Perlin, and it's adapted from James Hansen's book, First Man, The Life of Neil Armstrong, which is interesting because Neil Armstrong is somebody who, you know, first man to walk on the moon, hence what this movie is about, but a very, very private person. It was very difficult for a book to be made in the first place, so it is very interesting to see a movie come out of that, because a book, it's hard enough to capture who a person is when they really don't show a willingness to share a lot about themselves, maybe out of modesty, maybe out of just the mystique of Neil Armstrong. So this movie is a very interesting experiment. Obviously, the film, if you haven't heard already, it's been getting incredibly good reviews at Venice Festival, Telluride, and Toronto. and it's probably a sure thing for picking up some Oscars, at least nominations. As I mentioned before, it is an intimate look at the life of astronaut Neil Armstrong. During the 1960s, we meet him very early in his career, and then finally on that fateful Apollo 11 mission, Ryan Gosling stars as Armstrong, and the full cast includes Claire Foy, who plays his wife Janet, as well as Paula Schreiber, Kyle Chandler, Ciarán Hinds, Ethan Embry, who I don't even know if Ethan Embry says anything, but he is in the background. Jason Clarke has a huge role in this. Brian Darcy James, Corey Stoll, Christopher Abbott, Patrick Fugit, Shea Wiggum, and Lucas Haas. This is a packed cast. I mean, there were just people in the background of this movie that I was like, oh my gosh, that's that person from that show.
Yeah. It's quite the cast for sure.
Yeah, and they're just there having fun. Apparently, Damien Chazelle has a pretty wicked Rolodex.
Oh, damn. You got
there it is. All right. Will Ashton, did you see this one in IMAX? And what did you think of First Man overall? This is a 2.5-hour movie. I'm curious.
Yeah, I didn't see it in IMAX. My screening was just a regular theatrical presentation. So I didn't get that experience, but I heard it's very much worthwhile seeing it that way, especially the stuff at the end on the moon. No spoilers, I guess, but I kind of figured that.
Whoa.
But yeah. You were mentioning the like really good reviews, and I can certainly see why this movie has gotten such a good critical response, because there's not really much I can complain about from a critical standpoint. Like, everything about it is well executed. It's well made from a technical standpoint. I'm sure it's going to get a lot of like sound design nominations and things of that nature, including probably best director and whatnot.
Yeah, Maverick disagrees and says that the sound mixing was not good for him.
I think that was a theater we went to, because that was the same theater that we went to for Blade Runner 2049, and I had the same complaint then.
It wasn't the same theater.
I mean, but it's the same.
Okay, well, maybe I misspoke. I mean, maybe I don't know about the mixing per se, but I think the sound design was very good, strong.
I agree with that. So Maverick and I don't. Agree,
so you just don't think the sound was good in general, Maverick?
No, I have to clarify. I think the sounds were great. All that stuff. I just had a hard time hearing people talk over the sounds going on at times. Like, it felt like it was kind of muddled at times,
which I don't agree with. But
okay. Yeah, so that's I think that's sound mixing, because sound design is like the Foley work and like the things that, like what everything sounds like.
He said sound mixing when we were talking about it.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Okay. Just making sure. So yeah, I mean, from everything, as far as how the movie was put together, I don't have too many complaints from a technical standpoint, but I guess kind of similar to Dunkirk, which is a comparison that's been made already, but it's basically how I felt. I didn't really feel that emotionally connected to the character, and I get that Neil Armstrong is a reserved person. I think they handled that well. The moments where it is fairly emotional, I think, are well earned, and I am disappointed that there's a moment on the moon where it could have been a really natural, poetic ending, and I felt they kind of kept going, like an epilogue scene where it's like, okay, like I guess we can keep doing this, but it kind of strained the moment, I felt. But ultimately, yeah, I like the film. It's definitely a good one. It's going to win a bunch of awards and whatnot, but especially compared to Damien Chazelle's last couple films, especially Whiplash, I consider among the best movies of this past decade. I think it's a masterpiece through and through. And La La Land, I really do love, despite the backlash against it. This movie, I liked it. It's good, but I just found myself kind of underwhelmed by the end.
Yeah, I have to disagree quite a bit.
Yeah,
I actually think, yeah, and I think this might come down to like our disagreements on Dunkirk, maybe. I think this movie, I'm glad you brought up how it compares to Whiplash and La La Land, two movies that I love, but in completely different ways. And I think First Man scratches a third itch for me, which is interesting. But that is interesting. We definitely agree on the technical aspects. This is a long movie, and you spend a lot of time watching one person really not react to his environment, who has trouble expressing his emotions. We can get into it, but I would just say that I did connect with that emotional through line in this film, but I am seeing a lot of people who aren't. It's a film that's kind of leaving people cold, and I'm very curious about that. I'm curious about like why it had an effect on me personally. And I've been thinking through that. I don't think it's one of those like, well, he's an introvert and I connect with introverts, because I think a lot of introverts are probably having the same complaint. But there is something about this performance here that I do think that Ryan Gosling will get an Oscar nomination for what he's doing here. And I definitely can't say that there's something wrong with the performance or something wrong even with the writing. I wonder if a lot of it has to do with this kind of like feeling of, do we want to feel good about America right now? Maybe there's some sort of like this movie, the time it's being made in, maybe there's something to, our current climate, as it were, that is kind of preventing people from feeling good about an event that happened so many years ago with so many, with people who, I don't know. There's something to that. It's kind of like with The Post last year. The Post was kind of this like, victory lap of nostalgia that I don't think people were in the mood for. And I think First Man maybe is also seeing a little bit of a division there. What about you, Maverick Hines? Did this movie have an effect on you, and how so?
Yeah, I think I'm right in between you guys, because you guys aren't that far off in your opinions overall. Like you alluded to, I did have some issues with the sound at times, but again, I think I have to give that kind of an asterisk, because that might just be the theater we go to, because the last 2 IMAX movies I've seen there, I've complained about the sound, which I think is supposed to not be a thing you complain about in IMAX. So I think it just might be an unlucky situation for me. Otherwise, I think Will said it well. Yeah, it's technically a really, really well-made movie. It's really good. I in hopes that I don't sound too much like an idiot, I felt at times that it was a little too slow during the movie. Maybe it's just I don't have the attention span of most smart people. I don't know what's going on here, but there were times where I was like, all right, like, let's move on a little bit. And I think that does have a lot to do with, Neil Armstrong's character of being so reserved that there wasn't enough to capture my squirrel, mental focus of what's going to happen next, because so many times we're just kind of very, stoic, not relaxing, but like kind of mild moments. And
if I can interject, I would say, I don't think it's a smarts thing. I think that drag is there if the immersion doesn't work on you. Because I had the opposite effect, but I don't think it was smarts. I think it was just, I was fully immersed, and I think that's where the technical aspects shine.
For sure.
Because every scene was a painting, and I had to like absorb it. It was a lot like Blade Runner 2049, where I had to adore it visually, and it kept me going.
Well, I never felt that during Blade Runner, though. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think it's just maybe a genre thing too. But also, I just think that me not being, still a little sober, maybe I wasn't as captivated by the technical spots between those scenes that would have kept me going, or like you said, everything was a painting.
Like my mind was racing trying to figure out how they shot certain things and why the vantage points were in
so I guess I wasn't having those thoughts, and those probably would have kept me kind of in that immersion. What were you going to say, Will?
Well, I was going to say, I guess for me, maybe my problem was that like I really found the stuff inside like the shuttle when like it's like first person, like getting like really claustrophobic like that. I found that very good, but like they also shot like a lot of the movie like that style, and I don't know. I heard people complain about that with The Star Is Born. It didn't really bother me then, but this time like the extreme close up like cinematography and stuff really kind of bugged me.
I really loved it. Oh, I loved
it. It felt like too like. I don't know, like it felt too contained to the point where it's like I wanted more breathing room like in those scenes.
That's what I liked though. I
wanted a separation between the two, but like maybe it's like the movie went on, it got more claustrophobic, but like it started from the beginning like super like wound up and tight, and there was no like real diversion between those scenes. So for me, it just kind of felt like, oh, it's just like that wound up style like through the whole thing. If there was like more of like a break, and there was at the end with the space stuff, which I found really affecting, but ultimately, I guess I think there need to be more of that to really captivate me personally.
I remember exact scenes and the staging that they did, which is very rare for me to have like really followed the director's vision on that. And I have to completely disagree. I think that the extreme close-ups and the way that it's shot, especially in the scenes in the home, were so captivating to me, because you really got the sense that it was like a Super 8 recording, a little bit shaky, a little bit like really that 60s feel.
Yeah,
and it did so much to get me in there. And it even the extreme close-ups, the kind of like shoddy, like blurring effects were. Maybe it's something about that decade that I really connect to. You guys know I love Mad Men. Mm-hmm. I was thinking a lot about contextual stuff in Mad Men, and like the way that people took home video, even the way that the casual observer was like a vantage point that was like often used. There was something about that. Maybe it's hitting me on that level, and so I'm definitely overlooking maybe some of the lack of diversion. Although I don't think I can see that lack of diversion. But
yeah, I think I'm a little closer to John on that one. I wasn't bothered by the claustrophobic shots and the tight shots, because I think for me those were the best in the movie, and those were when I was most like. I was the most immersed and suspenseful. It was, for me, it was the in-between shots, like when he was at home or when they were kind of talking throughout the NASA facility, where I was just like, man, I feel like this is dragging just a little bit, but not all the time. Like, I don't want to make it sound like I'm being super negative.
That's what I'm basically saying. Like, yeah. I think if there's like a little like more of a break and stuff, like I get like from an editing standpoint why it's made the way it is, but I just felt like to get that full like immersive emotional investment, I felt like it was kind of lacking in that regard for me personally.
For sure. And then the last thing I guess I'll say about it is that you know, though I do have those kind of minor complaints, again, I have to reiterate, I think this was a really, really good movie, and I had a good time with it. And I will say that the moments that were meant to be suspenseful and the moments that were kind of intense were probably some of the most captivating I've experienced this year in a movie. Like, I was like biting my nails, literally. I was just like, wow, like I was in those moments very, very deeply, and they were intense. So I really enjoyed that. I was able to, in a movie where I did feel bored at sometimes, it always brought me back, which is good, right? Like, it wasn't like I was in the movie for 20 minutes, I lost it, and then I was just out for 2 hours. You know what I mean? So I was glad to be able to go through those cycles and come back into the movies after having those low moments.
I do wonder if seeing the film in IMAX has a bit of a curve to it, which might not be a good thing, because we both saw it in that, and that was where, I mean, the filmmaking shines so much for me. It's possible that I really, because you know, following the life of this guy who, you know, you just want him to say something, you just want him to react.
He's like, dude, talk.
His wife does all the reacting for him, and I mean, Claire Foy is just putting her best out there. And this is somebody who, and I was kind of arguing with somebody about this on Twitter yesterday about, you know, they were like, I want to know more about him. Why is he an astronaut? Why does he do this? Why don't we? And I'm like, that's not the story. Like, if they had tried to, like, you know, here's Neil Armstrong as a kid, and if they had tried to pretend a life for him, I think it would have rung so false. Mm-hmm. He's such a contained person. And I think they found a really good, like, there was one thing somebody complained, it was like his motivations, you know, very, very early on, he loses his daughter. It's like the first scene. And, you know, somebody was like, that's his only motivation for the whole movie and all this stuff. And I was like, what? Because, you know, this is somebody who, it's like loss, compounding upon loss, and just bringing on that burden. And, you know, that story that is being told of a guy who's like impeccably modest, dealing with loss, there was something very classic American. Mm-hmm. And again, if somebody's not in the mood for that, I can understand. But I wasn't even in the mood for that. But I think that's where the filmmaking and, you know, just the capturing of this event sucked me in so much that I couldn't look away.
I thought that was actually, like, there's one scene like close towards the beginning where like it's right after what you're talking about happened, and like the shot is like it just him at a desk and it's like far away, and then we kind of move in and see like this very intimate reaction shot. And what you're talking about, I think that's where it's really effective. I just kind of wish there was like more of like that break, like if there was like a little bit like back and forth. If we had that, I think that would have made the movie more affecting for me. But I agree with everything you're saying. So
it's such a different movie from La La Land and Whiplash. I mean, what do we think of Damien Chazelle at this point as a director? I mean, you know, it just feels like he's trying not to get typecast into, he didn't want to get typecast into like, you know, music movies. And then he didn't want to get typecast into musicals, I guess.
Yeah, because there was like this whole thing where people keep calling this movie space jazz in a fairly dismissive, derogatory type of way, which this movie is not. Yeah. I think that's annoying and petty, but
Justin Hurwitz did do the music for this, like he did for La La Land, and once again,
and
the
Tom
soundtrack
Cross
is amazing.
I think Tom Cross also did the editing. He was the editor on both Whiplash and La La Land as well.
It's so funny too to see this movie after Venom, because Venom was so poorly edited, and then you see what like a masterclass in editing is like. Yeah, we have to give a lot of props to that post-production team. Chazelle surrounds himself with very good people and producers.
And let's not gloss over what you said a second ago. The soundtrack for this was incredible. It was absolutely perfect.
Yeah, Justin Hurwitz puts out, I mean, once again, like this is a soundtrack that I was adding songs to my playlist, which is already packed with La La Land and Whiplash. Cinematography here, Linus Sandgren, you know, obviously did an amazing job with La La Land. I don't think he also did Whiplash. I may be incorrect about that. I think his first thing with Damien Chazelle was La La Land, and it's this. There's something about the way that his cinematography really affects me, like the way it captures. We've said a lot, but nostalgia. He also did Battle of the Sexes, and the way that he does like the super 35 millimeter.
I was gonna say like all these like very film type movies, like film, like literal film.
Which is so interesting to see him kind of play with 16 millimeter in this film. I thought it was very interesting, and especially because like he shot it in the IMAX ratio. So yeah, I definitely dug it. Looking forward to Nutcracker in the Four Realms. I think is his next film.
Oh really?
Yeah. I believe he was cinematographer on that. But anyway, let's wrap up with our final thoughts on First Man. I think we all have only slightly different opinions, and we all seem pretty confident in our opinions. Like not a lot of like hesitation. Like I feel like this is the kind of movie where you can kind of make your mind up on it, one way or the other. And I'm glad to hear that it's all fairly positive. So Maverick Hines, why don't you start us out?
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know how much more there is to add as far as final thoughts go, but I think it's definitely a movie worth seeing. And if you can see it in kind of a special screen, whether it be Dolby or IMAX or whatever, I think it's worth looking at. Hopefully your IMAX screen's a little bit better than ours is, but yeah, it's
or Dolby if it's available. Yeah,
I was just gonna say this movie should have been in Dolby. Like, can you imagine those final scenes in that? Man, that would have been great. Really good movie with an amazing soundtrack and some pretty suspenseful and captivating moments. It was great. I'm really stuck between a B+ and an A-, and I don't know like where I'm at with that. I think I'm gonna lean A- though.
All right, strong A- from Maverick Hines. This is in my top 10, which means it is an A- for me. The minus, and I didn't really get into my flaws or anything like that. I think you can nitpick a lot with this one. I think the only thing that kind of left me hanging there overall on this, what kind of limits it, is I don't think they quite stuck the landing, no pun intended, with some of the ways that they dealt with Neil Armstrong and the camaraderie between him and his fellow astronauts. They didn't quite sell the relationship in ways, especially with him and his wife. I think just in general, his relationships, and I think Will, you've kind of alluded to this a bit too. And then I don't fully dismiss, or I don't even dismiss a lot of those criticisms. I think there is something to the final shot of the film not feeling quite earned to me, which is all I'm trying to say. And there was something that I was like, there's something more to this that they left off. It's actually kind of funny because you said the epilogue. It's like it kept going and going. I actually wanted either something different or something else to finish out. But again, it's a very high A-. This might actually be in my top 5 of the year. So I definitely really enjoy it. And then, yeah, Will Ashton, close us out.
Yeah, I mean, you were saying that everyone here kind of knows their opinions. I was actually kind of scratching my head throughout the week trying to figure out exactly where I land on it.
Oh, interesting. Sorry, I misspoke.
No, you're okay. I just wanted to speak for my
confident.
No, it's actually, I don't know. I mean, like, but the thing is that I didn't really I thought I was going to be reflecting on this movie more, but truth be told, like after I saw it, I haven't really thought about it too much. Just more like trying to figure out why it didn't like hit me quite as hard as it hit you and a lot of other critics. And I mean, I don't know. I guess for me, like with La La Land and Whiplash, and I haven't seen his first film, but with the two that I have seen other than First Man, it just feels like they are very personal, passionate films. And that's not to say that this movie isn't personal. I mean, I don't really know Damien Chazelle as a person, so I can't say, but it just didn't feel quite as mostly rich as those movies. And I get that it's going for something different, and I applaud Damien Chazelle for being versatile and trying to push himself and his fellow filmmakers to do something that's a little out of their wheelhouse. And I'm really excited to see where he goes as a filmmaker, because I think he's got long legs and he's going to be, definitely one of our most prestigious talents. And I think he has a great career ahead of him. But as it stands, I did like the film. I like you said, I mean, there's really not much besides a couple nitpicks that I can complain about. But I do agree with you that I think maybe it was just the relationship between Gosling and Claire Foy that didn't really strike me. Because like I saw someone on Twitter describe it. I apologize for not knowing the person by name off the top of my head, but it was just like Claire Foy plays a certain type of Oscar movie character, and she's the only woman in the movie and she's concerned, which is like just how I felt there. Yeah. which is like just how I felt. Like I mean, Claire Foy did a great job. I think her performance is very good. I'm sure she's going to get nominated, and they'll play that one clip where she's yelling at Kyle Chandler for the Oscar reel. But as it stands, I just like you said, like that ending. If I felt more for their relationship, then I would have really resonated with this. This film really would have resonated for me. But as it stands, I just felt like it's very well done, and I certainly can see why it's going to be a top 10 contender for a lot of people and why it's going to get a Best Picture nomination and compete with A Star Is Born. But yeah, especially compared to A Star Is Born, it just didn't really hit me in the heart quite as much. So I'm going to give it a firm B+. I mean, it's really going to be a good film. I'm sure like Apollo 13 and the right stuff, it's going to be played in like high schools and stuff to teach you about space exploration, all that stuff. And it's well deserved in that regard. I think the technical stuff is all fantastic, but I just wish I had a more emotional investment to the film personally.
Yeah, it is interesting. They don't really dive into what the science means. It's more about how people react to it. We didn't really mention that. A few things before we move on that we didn't mention. I think that the gender dynamics at play here are quite, noticeable. And yeah, I think we were missing something. We were missing an establishing moment between the husband and wife that kind of explained who they are, why they are. And then also, there were some like loose threads I forgot to mention that kind of also held me back with this. With like, they play the poem like Whitey on the Moon, a very famous speech about, how the space program spent so much money. And, while people were, especially people of color, were disenfranchised and, feeling like, the government was, so obsessed with putting a white man on the moon that they didn't pay attention. And, so Chazelle puts that in there, and it kind of captures the mood, but it presents it almost as like an obstacle for these like heroic characters. That kind of fits into my overall point of like how, man, it really is hard to get on this film's wavelength at times for that reason. So that might be a stumbling block for some people. It is very funny that initially this one was like being looked at as like those, alt-right losers who were like, oh, the flag, doesn't drape around the entire moon like a Christmas present.
At least 2 shots of the American flag in this movie.
Yes, this film has no trouble being patriotic. Yeah.
And what bugs me is that I know that somebody like on Fox News or whatever is going to like say that, they put that in after the criticism. Like, those are post-production.
This is like the faked moon.
You know what I mean? Like they're gonna,
but for politics. That's fine.
Like they're gonna cut it as a win that the flag is in the movie because like they spoke loud enough, and I'm sure it was already in the movie to begin with, and that there was just like, yeah, that's what I mean. So anyway, sorry, that's just me rambling.
Yeah, I doubt.
It's a good rant. We'll never apologize,
and no one's gonna care, and whatever. And most people don't even know about this.
Care about the flag being in the movie. Like Neil Armstrong's kids had to speak out about it. So I don't know, whatever.
All right. Well, that'll do it for our review of First Man. We all definitely liked it. I think it's a pretty solid recommend. One of my favorites, and I think most people will watch it. And it's a long movie, but if you're in the mood to see it, just an impeccably made film, you should have a pretty decent experience. All right. With that, Will Ashton, I think you have to run, but thank you for sticking with us so late. We'll see you next time.
All right. See you, man. Have a good one.
Bye, Will.
All right, let's get into our mini reviews. Maverick, I saw a few things this week, but I think you kind of saw more than I did.
First time ever, Cinemaholics first.
Yeah, well, I've been very busy. A lot of stuff.
Well, these are also from 2 weeks ago, so I've just been saving up.
What do you want to start with? I know there was one thing you saw with Jeffrey Wright in it that I really wanted to see on Netflix, right?
Yes, Hold the Dark, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can start there. Hold the Dark is a new Netflix original. Synopsis is summoned to a remote Alaskan village in search for the wolves that killed 3 children. A wolf expert soon finds himself unraveling a harrowing mystery.
So that's why it's being compared to The Grey with Liam Neeson.
I was going to say, yeah, the reason I was so... Because I sent John the trailer for this movie a couple months ago, and I was like, wow, this looks like it could actually be pretty decent. It looks, it's looking cool. Had some very Wind River, The Grey vibes to it. Is that what it's called? Wind River? Yeah. Taylor just kind of the Alaskan guy goes in there with a gun. Let's see what happens kind of stuff with wolves.
Yeah, and we should say Jeremy Saulnier is like a really great film director. He did Green Room, one of my favorite movies of 2015. And he also did Blue Ruin, which I liked Blue Ruin. I know a lot of people love that film. So, but yeah, not exactly my favorites. So I've been looking forward to this one, but I don't know. Is it worth it? Like, I don't know if you've seen those movies. Did you see Green Room?
I haven't seen either.
I recommend it. I think you would like it a lot, and it's he definitely. I have a feeling because wolves are involved. It's kind of going to be that kind of like gritty, like who knows what's going to happen to these characters kind of movie.
Yeah, and you know, I kind of went in with that expectation of, oh, this is going to be like The Grey, right? I mean, like the dude's going in there to find a lost kid, or find the wolves who killed a kid. You know, so it's like, okay, this is pretty cut and dry. But I was still excited. Like I wasn't worried about it being too close to The Grey or have too many, you know, because this deals a lot with Native American treatment in Alaskan, you know, villages and tribes and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, you know, Wind River. I'm getting all these vibes. I'm really excited. And I'll say this is a very different movie than both of those. You know, the first maybe 20, 25 minutes is what you expect. And then the movie goes down a completely different road. This is a very unique, weird thriller horror movie that turns south quick. I will say that though I enjoyed it because it's very much a Maverick genre, right? Like this has all the things that I would want. It's a little hard to follow at times. And after reading, one thing I love to do when I watch a movie for the first time is I like to like Google the movie afterwards and read director interviews and talk, you know, like hear the director explain the endings and stuff like that. So when I did that with this one, there was a lot there that, and I won't give anything away, but the director talked about like, oh, if you watch the movie again, or if you watch this, you'll pick up that this is what's happening here and this is what's happening here. And I felt like it could be a cynisober symptom, but a lot of
cheating maybe.
Well, no, it's just like I felt like he kind of had to say that stuff because those answers weren't as obvious as I think maybe the director.
Oh, directors do that all the time.
Yeah.
Filling in the blanks for people and sort of like this was our vision and the studio hacked it to pieces.
Oh yeah, you could totally figure out that these two people were this and this was this.
It's like when BoJack is like, was the coffee cup there because perspective is... No, dude, some dude left a coffee
just
cup.
left a coffee cup. Yeah. So I feel like if I didn't go through and read those, that I would still be scratching my head a lot on this movie because it just doesn't do a good job of explaining the lore of this weird little world that it's created. But I will say visually visually it was really, really stunning movie. You know, it's hard not to make the Alaska wilderness look incredible in the winter, right? I mean, it looks incredible. It has some very thrilling and cool spooky moments and, you know, stuff like that. And I do think it's worth a watch if you're into that kind of style. You know, if you like a good thriller, you like a good spooky movie, but also you're into that kind of gray Wind River vibe, it's definitely still worth looking at. It's just not what you're going to expect. You know what I mean? So maybe that's a good thing for some people. For me, I didn't necessarily love it. It's still a recommend for me, but it's one of those recommends where like I have to kind of know the person, be like, yeah, I think you would like this. You know what I mean?
So I'm gonna guess your grade is either B or B minus.
Yeah, it's a B for sure.
Okay, yeah.
B minus. It is
B minus.
Yeah, it is a B minus. Just because I think it goes just a little too far at times away from what you're expecting, and I think it doesn't explain that well enough to validate going that far out of right field. So
you would recommend it, but not to most people.
Yeah, again, I have to be like, oh, I know you like this kind of stuff. Yeah, go watch it, right? But like if someone's like, oh, hey, I really like The Grey, but I don't like a horror movie, I'd be like, maybe don't. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. So
I'm curious what Will thought because it's written by Macon Blair, who directed that other Netflix movie, I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore.
He really liked that.
Yeah, Will really liked that film, and so unfortunately he couldn't stay for this. I know he saw it, so I mean, we're gonna have to ask him sometime.
Yeah, we can bring him on next week. Maybe him and I can talk about it. But yeah, I still think, again, I think John, you'll probably get something from it. It'd be a fun movie for cinephiles to kind of pick apart.
Yeah, I should have seen it over 22 July, honestly.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that next, or you want me to knock out another one before you go?
I'll quickly cover it.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, we are. This is sort of like the Netflix power hour right now.
That's all I watch from any reviews.
Yeah, the only thing I have that isn't Netflix related, and we'll talk about, is Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which I just kind of want to bring up. But yeah, 22 July is it's from Paul Greengrass. How many of the Bourne movies have you seen, Mav?
Exactly 0.
Oh, good. Well, he did. He did Supremacy. I think he did Ultimatum, and then he did like the most recent one, which was terrible. This film, fortunately, is not terrible. It is actually a pretty decent film. It's based in Norway. It's not technically Norwegian though, but it's based on a summer camp massacre that took place in 2011, which is interesting because it's historical, but I didn't know this story, which I think is it's very interesting that Greengrass made this film. He depicts the events using fictional characters, but I don't want to get into the specifics of this massacre because it is one of those things. Watching it unfold is part of the appeal, not appeal, but like it's part of like what makes the movie the movie.
Absolutely.
There's a scene where they find out like the details of what actually happened, and it just kind of leaves you kind of just sitting there trying to wrap it.
Wow.
And then there was another film that this is like a kind of an American remake of this film because it was made in Norway at one point, and then Paul Greengrass made this, and it's the same kind of deal, but the characters are speaking English, which I think it works because all the characters or all the actors are Norwegian, which I did appreciate that aspect of it. All of that said, it's a movie that follows the story of, you see the massacre take place, you see the methodical, nature of it, what actually happened, why it happened, and it's perpetrated by this neo-Nazi. And then you watch the aftermath. It sort of becomes a courtroom drama from there. He hires a lawyer who's kind of sympathetic to neo-Nazis, and then you see this battle between him and Norway, basically the prime minister. You see the students who survived kind of grappling with this, and it is a brutal movie.
Yeah.
It is like it is a long amount of time that you spend dwelling in the pain of these students, which at the one point is like, and on the one hand, it's just grueling because you feel as helpless as they are. I felt my pulse, my heart rate going up quite a bit during this, and it was kind of freaking me out. Like I had a hard time, coping with it. There are things that you see on screen that are really traumatic. I really,
yeah, you had mentioned it when we were talking about it midweek that it was pretty rough to watch at times.
I highly caution people from seeking this one out, honestly, especially if you have difficulty with that. I don't think this is a film that is worth the pain that you get out of it. Of course, I mean, it's not a bad film. It's certainly well acted. It's certainly well shot. Everything on display here is competent. There wasn't anything about it that kind of struck me or stood out aside from, really those, I don't want to say showy scenes, but those really methodical, pulse pounding scenes. And ultimately, I mean, this one kind of fell flat for me. It is far too long. I think that it is the kind of movie that almost just, it doesn't have a point of view on what it's trying to say about really most of these characters, with the exception of two of the victims. So I don't know. I'm still kind of wrapping my head around it. I think that the technical competency of it is kind of messed up by the fact that it is far too long and it loses that steam really, really early. So I'm kind of a C+ on it. It's a Netflix film again, so I don't know who to recommend this to, honestly. I don't think that there's anybody here. I don't know anybody who is looking for this movie, and so I'm kind of like, I can't even give it a B- for that reason. I can't recommend it to really anyone unless they're curious or unless they want an education about a world event that isn't really taught much, that isn't something that I sort of remember this massacre in the news. In 2011.
Yeah, I don't.
It was a while back for me. I was in college, and I was pretty plugged into world news, but I don't remember like really finding out the details of this and what went down, because it is horrific. That said, that's July. That's 22 July. Really tough movie, and it might be worth it for some folks, but I have a hard time identifying who they are. C+ for me. But okay, what's the next Netflix?
Yeah. Well, here's a nice little positive change of pace for you, Jonathan. I can talk about either. I'll let you pick. We can discuss American Vandal Season 2 or Big Mouth Season 2.
Double seasons, huh?
Double Season 2s.
I'm more curious. I never liked Big Mouth. I watched a few episodes and it didn't make me laugh. As much as I love John Mulaney and Nick Kroll and that whole deal, it's not for me. But yeah. American Vandal is something that I've been wanting to give a chance. So let's try that.
All right, Big Mouth it is. I will start with Big Mouth because I think I have less to say on it. Big Mouth's an interesting dynamic of a show because I love Nick Kroll. I think John Mulaney is hilarious. The entire cast is truly great, but Nick Kroll's weird voices really carry this show. And there are episodes where I'm laughing hysterically and I think it's really funny. And then there are episodes where I'm like, what? You know what I mean? And it's weird because this is a show about kids going through puberty and dealing with that, right? So like sometimes I get mad because I'm like, wow, that's such a childish joke. But then I go, oh wait, like yeah, like that's the point. You know what I mean? So there's some back and forth with me on this. Season 2, I do think is better than season 1 was. It's funnier. It's a little bit more consistently funny. You know what I mean? So it's not as much of a high low between episode to episode on like whether or not it's good. And it's starting to deal with things that are a little bit more real than the first one was, because the first one was all pretty much, you know, sex jokes and puberty. Haha, here we go. And towards the end of the season, we have some of the stuff with one of the kids' moms. I should really remember character names. But this season really brings in a lot more of what goes through, especially a young girl in her, you know, puberty experience and what's going on with that. And it introduces new kind of, you know, there's the hormone monsters, and it introduces new characters in that kind of weird universe of what the hormone monsters live that I think are important. And deals with a lot of that. So I do think that there is some merit to season 2, and I think it's worth watching if you got any enjoyment out of season 1. But if you hated season 1, I don't think you're gonna, you know, I mean, it's not a show for everybody, and I get that. I personally like it, and I think it's pretty good.
Speaking of season 2s of Netflix shows, Iron Fist got canceled. We forgot about that in Off Topics.
Yeah, I only watched one episode of season 2, and I was really bored. And so I'm not surprised. And I hate it, or I'm upset about it because I did like season 1. Now, I have to defend myself because when I say that, everyone's like, wow, you think that's good? You're stupid. That's the worst one. And I don't think it was the best
said that
one.
In confidence.
Yeah. I don't think Iron Fist was the best. Like, you know, I'm not saying it was fantastically made. For some reason, it just connected with me more, and I liked watching it. Maybe it's just because I'm in love with Jessica Henwick, but we don't have to talk about it.
Will Ashton hates Daredevil, by the way. Did you know that?
We don't have to talk about that either.
I called him blind when he said that.
That's funny. I like that.
I said, literally, you're the blind one.
Wow.
And he didn't respond.
That makes sense. I think that's a good response.
But that's what I usually do when you say things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it was kind of bound to happen. I wonder how they're going to continue his character within like the Luke Cage universe and stuff like that, especially now after Defenders where they're all kind of buddies. So we'll see what goes on with that.
Yeah, he's just going to be in the background, you know, just go from show to show. I mean,
he's
that's
just
fine. So why give him a show? Nobody's watching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sucks.
But let's talk about.
I hope Jessica Henwick's okay. Watch Jessica. I hope Jessica Henwick's okay.
She'll find work.
Okay. Good. Yeah. What's the next one?
Oh yeah, American Vandal.
Season 2. John,
I saw you watching it, and I was highly fascinated.
Yeah, so I'm gonna break your heart a little bit. American Vandal season 1 was hilarious. It was original. It was kind of like not what people were expecting when they first sat down to watch it. I really enjoyed season 1. I think it was kind of the perfect iteration of what that show can be. The unfortunate thing is that I think season 2 suffered from the fact that it was a Netflix show, in that the ending was kind of given away because sometimes you knew you had 4 more episodes before the show was ended. And I think this show, because what makes season 1 so cool, and I'm going to spoil it a little bit, so if you haven't seen it yet.
I haven't seen it.
What makes season 1 so great is that there's so many twists about who this Vandal is, right? Like, you know, on the 7th episode out of 12, you're like, oh, this is the person. And then every episode after that, it's like, oh, no, that couldn't have been this. It's this. You know, there's like a lot of like sneaky little plot twists and little like, oh, it couldn't have been this because, you know, it's crazy. And I think that really worked the first time where it's like, whoa, who is it? What's going on? You know, and also this is hilarious. And I think the second season actually suffered from that a little bit because I knew it was going to happen. The first time I watched the season,
the formula was a little bit too predictable.
The formula ruined it. And also, like I said, the fact that it was a Netflix show ruined it, because there were times where I was like, oh, wow, this is it. And then this episode ended. It was like, would you go to the next one? And I was like, what? And then I looked and there was 3-4 more episodes left. And I'm like, well, yeah, now I know it's not this person that you just tried to convince me it was. And I think that really hurt the show. You know, this might be one of those shows that would benefit from a weekly release or, you know, whatever, kind of a little bit more suspense in between episodes, because if you're going to binge this, you're going to never believe that what you're seeing is it until the last episode.
Maverick, that's every mystery movie or show ever. The red herrings always are like halfway through.
I don't know. It's just not halfway through. Because I mean, this show does that, but I'm saying like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just not explaining it well, but I think it doesn't work.
I like the mystery in Wind River because it's like it feels more inevitable than it does feel.
Yeah.
Like
But it's never like exhausting. You're never like,
You
okay,
brought it
I
up.
get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's more what I'm complaining
Maybe
about.
American Vandal would make a better film than it would a TV show.
Honestly, maybe.
It's a lot of hours of content.
Yeah. But a lot of it they could cut out, like they do a lot of this stuff just for the sake. Like in this season, it's all about the turd burglar who poisons the kids like drinking water at school or like one of their lunch drinks, and everyone like poops their pants at school, and they call it the brownout. Like that's the big prank that they're investigating. And like I lost my train of thought because I had to say poop too many times.
I'm trying to collect my thoughts as well.
Yeah, it's a lot.
What is this show?
But anyway, I would just say that I think that, the formula just gets a little too exhausting at times, and I wasn't nearly as invested as I should have been at the end. And I think if they're going to continue to do this, that they need to find a different way to kind of keep everybody invested and like actually curious about what's going on. Because if a season 3 comes out, it's going to be like, okay, like I know, like, what am I doing? You know what I mean? It's going to get tiring. So still funny, still has some of that great humor, still has this great like satirical how to make a murderer vibe, which I think is part of the appeal. But yeah, I think it's worth checking out if you like the first season.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, one of these days I'm going to sit down and watch the whole thing. And
probably not.
Who knows? Maybe I'll become the biggest fan. Last we have Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I've been playing this game last couple of weeks. Really solid. And again, I don't usually talk about games unless I have something to say, really, which isn't very often. But I did want to bring this up because I know a lot of people are like, Assassin's Creed, that time they made 12 games and they were all exactly the same.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was true. But Assassin's Creed Odyssey is totally different. It's like an RPG. It takes place in like the during the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta. And it's like an open world, massive map game. I'm loving it. It follows the story of like a mercenary who's like a Spartan. So if you like the movies 300, if you like both of the films, that and Rise of an Empire, it's tackling that era. It's tackling like really like a part of the Greek wars that, I was literally watching videos on YouTube of like explain to me the Athens and Sparta war and like why they were at war, because I was having trouble. Like I wanted to pour into this historically, and I was like, man, it's been a long time since an Assassin's Creed game made me care about history.
Yeah,
because that was like the point.
Yeah, wasn't that the whole thing?
Yeah, but then over time, it just sort of like it became so choked up on its own lore and mythology that I think around the time when they were in like the American Revolution, I was like, this has become less about history and way more about just political intrigue between characters that isn't as interesting. And then over time they put in entries that are really solid, like Black Flag was the last Assassin's Creed game that I really enjoyed. That was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
This one, also you can like that's the one with the pirates and the ships and all of that. This one has all of that as well, and it's probably the best it's been in a while. But this is really solid if you want to like get sucked into the Greek world. And it's like you want to just see an entire massive game that you feel like I haven't felt this lost in a huge map since like probably Breath of the Wild.
Oh wow,
the Zelda game. It's up there with Breath of the Wild and Skyrim in terms of like open worlds that really feel like packed and like you have a ton of stuff you can do and a lot of options. So yeah. I definitely recommend it. It's really cool. And if you play the game, definitely play as Cassandra. You have a choice between her or her brother Alexios. And she is hilarious, and she's very solid. She's like just this like really burly Greek wisecracking, mercenary who's just really strong, and her delivery in certain lines it's pretty funny. So good game. From a cinematic lens, I haven't finished it, so I don't know how the story ultimately plays out. That might be one of the weaker things about it, because the story is a lot of like, you killed my father, and like all this stuff, and I'm like, oh man, like your father, your brother, your mother, like everybody in your family is like the most important person in the Greek world. Okay. That part of it's kind of grating on me a little, but definitely worth playing. I don't know, Maverick. You play Assassin's Creed games? Like, where are you at with those?
I really liked the first one. I never played a lot of the ones after that because I saw the same game get released. This is like watching a Call of Duty release. I was like, I know it. Like, I don't really know. So last year when I went through kind of a big video game thing, when I was playing like all the BioShock games and stuff, I think I started playing Black Flag as well. Yeah. And I think I stopped after a couple weeks. It was just, I don't know. I think the games now just don't do much for me.
Well, this game, like, you don't even really do like a lot of assassinations. Like you don't have like the hidden blades or anything.
Yeah. Assassin's Creed, how dare they?
Yeah, I mean, you can still assassinate people, but yeah, maybe you might get a kick out of this one. It's a totally different gameplay style.
I'm saving all of my video game energy for whenever The Last of Us 2 inevitably comes out.
Well, there's Red Dead Redemption, which comes out on the 26th. I'm trying to finish Assassin's Creed before then.
Did you finish Spider-Man before this one? Like, I feel like you've got a lot of...
It's a packed fall. And Assassin's Creed, I took a week off of work for part of my vacation, and I'm going to spend a lot of it playing this game so I can get done before Red Dead Redemption. So that's where I'm at.
Cool.
Internet. Okay, that'll do it for this week's episode of Cinemaholics. But real quick, we'll get into what movies are coming out next week. I'm going to be out of town, so I don't even know if I'm going to be on next week's episode. Hopefully I will be, because we are going to be talking about Halloween. Halloween is the new film about Michael Myers from David Gordon Green. There's also The Hate U Give, which Will Ashton already talked about a couple of weeks ago. We'll be able to see that because it's expanding into more theaters. That's, of course, the film based on the Angie Thomas YA book, the Black Lives Matter story. And then a bunch of indie releases. The only one that I really want to see is Wildlife hits limited release next week. Also, Can You Ever Forgive Me, which they're seeing maybe Melissa McCarthy might get an Oscar nomination for performance in that film. And then Mid-90s, which we've been looking at, possibly being good. There's also What They Had, which I missed my screening for. Apologize. And a few other films like The Guilty and On Her Shoulders are finally rolling out. That said, I think for next week, we're going to be talking about Halloween and The Hate U Give, maybe another double feature. I'm not sure. It's kind of tough because we also want to talk about Bad Times at the El Royale. So we might keep it pretty tight. We'll send out a poll for our patrons. If you want to get involved with helping us decide what to review, just become a patron on our Patreon. That's in our show notes, and you can check that out. Do you have anything to add?
No.
You look like you were deep in thought. Like, do I want? I was
actually thinking about the logistics of next weekend for recording.
It is going to be tricky.
It's going to be a fun one.
We'll figure it out. We'll put out hopefully as good an episode as ever. But for now, that is it for us at Cinemaholics. Thank you as always for listening. If you want our show to continue, don't forget to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever you love podcasts, and hang out with us on Facebook and Twitter. Links to our social stuff is in the show notes. If you want to see videos, if you want to see like archived things, anything that you might have missed on a previous episode, check out our YouTube. It's also Cinemaholics. That's also in the show notes. And you can email us anytime, cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com. But for Will Ashton, who had to leave early this week from the Internet Pennsylvania and from the Internet California, I am Johnny Rooney.
And from the Broadband Basement, I am Maverick.
See you next time.
Bye.